This is a remote viewing project of the Rollright Stones in Warwickshire, England.
This is one of the most mystic places in Britain you may never have heard of.
I chose to task the Rollright Stones, particularly the King's Men stones, because of a video I came across whilst researching ley lines. The stones are said to be around 6,000 years old. The video depicted men dowsing at the stones and showed some kind of energy field that was indicated by the dowsing rods. Upon further research, I found that other people had also researched these kind of energetic anomalies associated with the stones. And so I wanted to see if we could use remote viewing to find out the reason for the construction of the stones and any information about the energetics associated. This was my first time tasking a blind target to the viewers. My initial thoughts about the stones were that they were perhaps related to something astrological, like movements or alignments of the celestial bodies. So I was surprised by what the viewers' work led me to discover through research. There are countless stone circles around Europe and England. I didn't want to go with anything like Stonehenge because I think it's been done.
It's been done to death. Everybody knows, yeah, everybody knows Stonehenge so well. I'd never heard of the Rollright Stones before, and I thought this was a really cool project, and the experience of doing it was very interesting.
Yeah, and it was your first ERV target, wasn't it?
Yes, well, I've done a few practice targets on a website that are basically just like a picture of mountains or a picture of a building. So this was my first target for a person. And so it was really exciting to do this project for you, and then to find out that my results were actually on target. So that was really exciting for me, and I think I needed the boost in confidence. But the thing that was the most exciting for me in this whole thing was that all of the viewers had similar results. And that my results, even though I'm a newbie, my results matched along with what everybody else had found.
And I think that's one of the interesting things about doing group projects like this. Some information we can't verify, but the consistency amongst the viewers' work, I think, can't be a coincidence, considering everyone's blind.
How were the remote viewing results different from what you had anticipated?
My preconceptions about the site were perhaps that it was something astrological. Now, I think that there are definite some astrological aspects to it in terms of how the stone's magnetic anomalies react at certain points of the equinox and the solstices and things like this. And I really wanted it to be something astrological, actually, because I have a personal interest in astrology, and it was the only thing that I could think of a valid enough reason why I would think that people would drag these stones for miles and place them in this exact place for. So when everyone started handing in their sessions and they were water related, I kind of thought, well, you know, maybe there is a chance that I didn't task this correctly, or maybe there is a chance that the viewers' subconsciouses bounced to an area with water nearby the stones. So I had to do a lot of digging, and I just thought this can't be a fluke that everybody's got water here. So the more I researched, the more I found that there is a potential theory linked to water under the surface, which may have been indicated by the stones being placed there. The book that I bought by Maria Wheatley, it had reference to it in as well, into these ancient aquifers, but I think it just seems like a more valid theory than folklore surrounding the stones. So I think that it's interesting that we didn't know about any of this beforehand, or I didn't know about any of this beforehand, and that now there is a potential verifiable reason.
I thought that was interesting that you seem to have found a direction that you weren't expecting. And that's what I kind of think is also really exciting about remote viewing, is that it will, it doesn't really matter what your opinion is. It just kind of forces its way and points you and says, think about this and do research on this. So you did research on the aquifers. Could you tell me what led you to start looking in that water direction?
So I think it was a combination of two things, actually. The first thing was that all the viewers were mentioning underground water sources. And then the second thing was the spiral of energy, which can be indicated by the dowsing. And so when I came across that graphic and that research where you can see the spiral and then you can see the underground aquifer, I thought, is that a coincidence? I don't see how it can be. And to me, it kind of makes sense that they would mark a site like that with stones if there was a water source that they could reach below, because we don't know what the world was like when they were alive. So we don't know how easily accessible water was at the time. Here is the first task to the viewers. Describe the structure and original purpose for the construction of the Rollright Stones, specifically the King's Men stones in England. The viewers to focus on and explain the reason and the use of the structures. So I wanted to show all of the impressions of structures and land that the viewers came up with in their sessions. And one correlation between all of the viewers was that they focused on a kind of circular type structure. So here is John Adams' sketches, where he has drawn some circular shapes and sketches, and he also has the impressions of natural and land, which is a perfect description of the area. This is the first page of John's session where he has natural and land. I think that's motion, echoey, bumpy. He has AOL of cave, which quite a few other people had. Tall structures. He has kind of the land element there.
Natural land, and I remember that it was seemed like it was open. I think I had written vast or something like that, but I know that it's pretty open, kind of spread apart area. I did have the feeling that it was a lot about energy, and there was also technology involved. I'm pretty sure I had written something about fairies, and it's interesting that there's the 3 fairies made out of wicker. They're like the dancing fairies or something like that. So the legend goes that they come out at certain times and dance around the stones.
Okay, yeah, interesting. There's a lot of kind of folklore and weird legends connected with this site, and I think because it's so old, I think a lot's happened here and it's been used for a lot of different things. And there is definitely, you'll see as we move on through the slideshow, there's definitely some sort of weird mythological or magical aspect to the site.
Were there, do you believe, ritualistic practices or,
Yeah, 100%.
It makes me think about how, I guess, using psychedelics in ritual manner, and then you have fairies and elves show up there as well. So I wonder if that was used, or there's a link or something like that.
Yeah, could very well be. But what I loved about your circular drawing here is it is pretty much the exact site really from above. You've got the circle and then the little dots around the middle, which I thought was amazing. And also you've got in that picture below, timing or timer, which a lot of other people had this kind of clockwork-like aspect to their work too. Lily also had some circular structures here, and she has a really good sketch of a stone nearby, which is called the Whispering Knight. And although it's not part of the Kingsmen stones, there is a theory that it is connected to the stones through ley lines. So it's really close by. So she had that it was a natural structure. She had an aerial view of this kind of circular shape here, feeling segmented. I thought that was quite interesting, considering the stones are apart from each other. Here is Don's circular structure here, and he also has what looks like stone type or jagged shapes marked around the outside. And Patrick too also had this kind of circular shape here, and there seems to be another theme running with the circular sketches, and that is the a kind of motion of energy of going round. So that's interesting. And Malgorzata, she also had many similar structures and sounds of market in an old ancient city. So what we do know about the stones is that they are ancient, and they probably were close to some kind of city, or perhaps in some sort of city at the time. Fabian, you had really great impressions about everything to do with the setting of the target. So you had the circular pattern, you had the rocky terrain, the pebbles, the hard ground, brownish colour, natural landscape, stones. Geological ground looks like rocks that have been slammed. Look behind you, quick flash of a swirl, top and bottom points that meet in a circle. So all of those impressions there are perfectly on target.
What I was seeing seemed barren. So my first impressions were barren landscape. There's not a lot here. If there's life, it's grass and maybe a few trees. I got the sense that there were hills and rocks. And then the circle, like you mentioned, and geological smells. I remembered, I say geological smells specifically because I had been to Iceland not too long ago. And so I had gotten used to kind of smelling lava rock and hot springs. So when I asked myself what's important about this target, I got a strong sense of stones. I came to one particular stone that was standing up between 5 and say 8 feet. And it seemed to stand out. It was one very important stone. I got a strong sense that it was a natural stone, but that it might have carvings in it that at the time during my session, I think I referred to as runes. But that was an AOL. I thought they were just, there was some kind of carvings in the stone.
Okay, so yeah, I think you did a great job of perfectly describing all of the natural stony and rocky kind of aspects of the target site, including the circular pattern also. Okay, so John Dixon, he had a lot of work on the target, and so he had pages and pages of these kind of circular structures. So I've just selected one because there was too many to put in there. But he also was very on target with it being a raised mound, a mounded area, pointed, jagged structure, and then he's got the circles there. I just wanted to touch upon how you all, pretty much all of you, mentioned the kind of circular aspect of the stones to start with. And then the next theme that I'm going to move on to is the verifiable data that we have is that this was actually a burial site. Whether or not that was the original purpose for the stones being constructed there, I don't know. But here is some photos of the excavation. So Chris, you drew what I thought looked like a bone and a tooth, and you even AOL'd tooth. And I thought it was very similar to this image here, which shows part of the things that were excavated. Patrick, you had feels somewhere like a cave or a tomb, something is here. And Fabian, you had, when I look up, I see bones and a spinal column. Chris, do you want to talk about those drawings at all and how you viewed them?
Yeah, so I guess my whole session it was a relatively short session. It was only 3 pages long, but I had a lot of kind of complex sketches. A lot of it seemed very aquatic. I think throughout the whole time, it was very, in the water. I think there's some biological. I think at the end, yeah, those particular sketches. I think the one was supposed to be like a tooth. I wasn't quite sure if it was like a mammal tooth or a marine animal tooth, but it did have that one sharp dorsal fin.
Here's Henrietta's drawings, which were really amazing, because not only do they look exactly like the target site, but there actually is a burial chamber in the center of those stones. To the side of your drawing is an example of what an actual ancient cairn burial chamber would look like. So that was really, really fascinating to see. How did you feel about seeing that in your work?
I have to be honest, like when I'm doing sessions, I'm usually really weirded out by some of the data. And this was one of those, because if I remember and I checked my sessions, all I was getting is like, it's rocky, it's crusty, it's an avocado shape, but it has something like a hollow. That's why I was like, why am I looking at like a rock avocado here? I was like, anyway, let's draw it. And when I went with the data, this is when I started to pick up, okay, there's more to this target than just, the rocky avocado with the hollowed out part in the middle. But I guess we are going to talk about that later. So I have probably I think this was the first few pages of my session. So that was like my connection. I usually have good visuals. I have a hard time understanding some of my visuals. This was one of the cases, but it turned out to be good, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it turned out to be exactly right. And as I said, I didn't know that there was a burial site here. I've heard that these ancient stones are burial sites, but to actually have it confirmed by your data and the research that I did was really, really fascinating. So this is the next part of your session that you did, and that's you drew this kind of jug here, which looks exactly like a funerary urn that was excavated at the site. So I thought that was really fascinating. John Dixon, he had impressions similar to yours, with the kind of circular chambers within the ground. And he reminds me of a hospital within a mountainside, which I thought was kind of similar to kind of burial type vibes. And the next part that I wanted to discuss with everyone, because what confused me the most about this project is that you all talked heavily about the presence of water, but if you actually look at the target site, there is no water visible there. And so I did a lot of digging into different theories of what these spirals of energies could indicate at the site. And I came across a theory of a geospiral of energy, which is indicated by dowsing at the site, that could potentially be a location of ancient under the ground pure water which can be somehow brought to the surface. But Henrietta, you mentioned here, connected to fluids. John Dixon also had whole-like, liquidy, liquid and water, deep canal-like. Then Lily, she also had a lot of references to water, and I think it was really, really interesting that she wrote the words wellspring, because there is also different areas across England and also other places in Europe that are called holy wells, and they are basically well springs that are connected to these ancient aquifers that bring up water, which is said to have pure and healing like qualities about it. And if you can see the sketch there, she's drawn a kind of under the ground, below the surface channel, and she's even written reflective like liquid. Chris, as you said before, your session was quite short, but it was really to the point. And I thought it was really interesting here that you drew this structure, which looks exactly like a H2O molecule. And you even wrote perceptions of spinning in water, swimming in water. Fabian, you also had references to springs. So you had hot springs, geological smell. The idea of a subsurface tunnel had returned, caverns beneath the surface, Luray caverns like dripping water. And you were hearing dripping water and echoing, conveying a cave-like feeling. So there's every possibility that there is caves beneath the surface here that we're not aware of, and probably water as well. And Malgorzata, she also had impressions of water, impressions and sounds of dripping water. Target appeared to be on water and closely related to the water. The target is based within some advanced settings and civilizations. John has these images of circular-like structures in a kind of under the ground cavern, cave-like space. And I think it's really, really interesting to look at this drawing and then to go back and look at this drawing here, which is just very, very similar to what he's drawn. So this is the book by Maria Wheatley, where some of the research to back up your data has come from. And the next target was describe the energy and or force associated with the King's Men Rollright Stones in England. What is the energy used for? John Adams, he AOL'd this date, February the 1st, which when I looked into is actually a date called In Bulk, which is it's a kind of celebration that's held halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And during this time, you would visit holy wells, which are said to be from sacred springs, which is what we've just talked about. And at the equinoxes, the stones are said to have more kind of anomalies and higher energy around that time. I thought it has to be relevant here because, you know, what are the chances of you AOLing a date that is kind of related to, you know, visiting these sites where you could get this holy water. Here's a picture of some guys doing an ultrasound at the Rollright, and it says that the intensity of the energy is basically greatest at the equinoxes. So yeah, I thought that kind of related quite well to that date. Is there anything that you would like to say about that?
I seem to, like you said, pick up on the energy. And I also felt like there was technology involved in this. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of higher technology or UFO involvement or something like that. Like has been connected to, say, the pyramids or Stonehenge and stuff like that. I don't really know, I'm just speculating, but that did pop up somewhat in the sessions. Yeah, and then that's that circular part again. Somehow that equipment is linked to structure.
I also like this AOL of superhuman, because the other people kind of picked up on that vibe as well. Crazy energetic thing going on there. The pendulum, which is interesting.
Yeah, I seem to have getting a little reverb, but yeah, there was a sense of flight. Space is important to this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then there's this kind of clockwork-like motion for whatever reason. AOL alien craft, yeah.
This is interesting up here as well, because this reminds me of the cycle that the sun and the moon make through the sky. Sorry, the moon makes through the sky, and Don mentioned this kind of like sine wave aspect as well. So I thought that was quite cool.
And you got like kind of static motion.
Yeah, and then you've got your trees there, which are really typical of that area of Warwickshire.
Yeah, it says population and advancement, I think is what I was referring to. Space has an important role in this target. Energy, entropy, atmosphere, aggrandizement. I don't know.
Do you want to talk about these?
I don't know if this would have, to me, this would have to do with if there was something technology related, then this could have been it. This could have been the energy emitting through the structure in some way, in some facet. It's like, if you could think of like, how would something aside from farmers going out and making crop circles, something from above that could maybe transmit energy. And I imagine that could possibly be related. And in fact, I guess there was a crop circle that was created around this site at one time, at least.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
These are some of Lily's kind of ancient people that she drew. A lot of you reference these people having strange robes. A lot of them were kind of holding these kind of poles. Feels mythological, she said. That's some more of her work there. She also had more circular structures within that. This is John Dixon's. I thought this was really, really interesting because he kind of included the moon and the earth here, which are to do with the equinoxes. And he had, so this character has a strange symbol on him in the middle, which I think looks like Neptune, the symbol, the alchemical symbol for Neptune, which is the god associated with rivers, springs, and waters. So I thought that was another kind of strange connection to water and these ancient people. Patrick, you had these kind of esoteric-y type men in robes figures. Would you like to have a little talk about what your impressions were about these characters that you mentioned?
I can see the resemblance to kind of the druid type of character, or the wizardy type guys.
Yeah.
But the feel I had of them were they were very angelic. They were very misty, kind of almost slightly transparent. They felt mostly kind of male, and it felt kind of militaristic or army-like, but not human, you know. So I'm not sure what that was. Was it just some angelic reference? Because in the first session I was picking up the gray stones, but I went straight to the energetics, and I was picking up the kind of portal idea, or I even said it was very centered in circle, like with a lot of energy moving upwards, like a tunnel of light at depth or to the heavens, that kind of thing. So I'm not sure if I was referencing heavenly aspect of it, because I said there was I kept going back to that. It seemed to be a very depth connection that I was picking up. So I can't tell whether I was picking up these characters that were present at the time or the afterlife. I'm not sure. Yeah, just that they felt very, very angelic, very army-like and very coordinated group. Strange. It was very strange because I felt there was some kind of connection between them and the people on Earth rather than them being the people on Earth. So I'm not sure whether it was some way of communicating with these and harnessing that kind of energy, because there is a magical aspect connected to this site as well. And I know there isn't an awful lot of history on Druid magic. I've been reading quite a lot on it lately. They didn't really leave much information about what they'd done and the practices that they'd done, only that they did, communicating with the afterlife, or what they call the underworld, was a big piece of their practice. So maybe that has maybe there's some connection there.
None of us can say for certain, I suppose, with these kind of wizardy drawings that you all drew, but I just think it was worth mentioning that you all made reference to these kind of characters. I liked your AOL Watches from the Book of Enoch. It just thought it gave such a lovely mental image of what these people could have been like. But there was such a heavy emphasis on these people being quite religious and doing ceremonies and having rituals. And as you can see down here, Malgorzata's had sounds like crowds chanting, smells of incense, which I would associate with kind of religious practice, rituals and things like that, which was interesting. Henrietta, this is your cool little wizard dude with his stick, which I thought was just amazing, because Lily had like a similar character with that stick. And there is some loose research that I came across with them using kind of poles in their rituals to do something connected with the water. I think they call it like a votive water offering or something. But I thought that was just another interesting connection and similarity you guys had. You had robe-like, male, older, wise, knowledgeable, peaceful, enlightened, very similar to Patrick's kind of ethereal characters that he was getting there. You also had connected to fluids and energetics somehow, purpose, ritualistic, transformational. I thought that was really beautiful that you wrote that. A lot of people touched upon the transformational kind of aspect of this target, but especially Lily as well, but I couldn't really find a concrete way of making it relevant to the actual stones. But I just thought that was interesting, and I think that maybe perhaps if we think about the fact that these stones could possibly be sites of sacred ancient water, that maybe they were coming there to use it for rituals or to use it to transform their health in some way. I liked that you had Philosopher's Stone as well, because it kind of gives that kind of like ancient kind of hermetic vibe, which I liked. Is there anything you'd like to talk about in regards to the characters that you drew, Henrietta?
Well, looking back at my sessions, I've noticed that Lily had something of a drawing with a hand holding something tubular. And I remember having drawn something like that, and hand motion of a whirling, like this tube or pole being, whirled around. Yeah, which seemed to be part of why they went there. Generally agreeing with Patrick. I think my original stray cats or AOLs would be Gandalf and Dumbledore and the Hermit on the guys. So they are like the white magician dudes. After that, I called them the Essenes, which also said that they were probably a bit more organized than just being one person. And they were somehow, bridging the gap of magical life and traditional life. I felt that they were like somewhat secluded, but absolutely benevolent and with a good intent and good nature around there. So yeah, I kind of liked that part of my sessions. It was viewing it was really like a nice experience.
There's your AOLs you were talking about Gandalf, Dumbledore, Santa Claus. I love that. You had words like magical, classical, of religious connection, of connection to Jesus associated with death. So that kind of reminded me of Patrick's as well. Roman, ancient, historic, belonging to a nation or civilization gone. That was just dead on. And then moving on to the more of the energetic and geomagnetic side of the site. So John had this kind of energetic structure, and he AOL'd magnetic there. Don, you also had this spinning kind of drawing here. And you also put it's directed energy that loops with a clock-like aspect. There is an aspect of traveling or movement. Do you want to discuss your feelings about this kind of?
What I have in my summarization here is the first part of the second session was all about construction. It was like, pulling stuff around and positioning and whatever. And then all of a sudden it changed into talking about something unusual that was religious and mystical. And it established a marker. I guess the stones are kind of like a marker. And there was a, let's see, 4 would be a musical connotation that directed you upward. Now, what is that? Is that some sort of like everybody's gathered around and dancing around and like this is like lifting you upward kind of a thing? Or is it more like a ceremonial kind of a thing? Those are good questions. Then my session went into a discussion about, my subconscious gives me the word nomenclature every once in a while when it wants to like go into like a little bit of a detail, and I got nomenclature sine wave. And then after that, I got this notion of an audio tone-based thing that was there was a clock regulated aspect implying that if this only happens at certain times, whatever it is. Now, I think this is the part that ties in more with like what Patrick was talking about. Then I go into this business about a mental journey that takes you somewhere that had both aspects of a musical, rhythmic, and harmonic blended kind of aspect that carries you to a different place. These are the words in my session. And it feels like I had an AI here. It feels like I'm surrounded by musical vibrations. And I felt like, I don't know, you were experiencing some sort of mystical experience when you're there, or you're involved in something like that. And then looping, changing harmonics with sharp elements that grow in strength or amplitude. Let's see, looping, box-like. It's directed energy that loops with a clockwise aspect. And then I asked, what sort of travel? And this is where it gets kind of to take you to different places. And I started getting the impression of like a craft, like an AOL helicopter, something both spinning and moving, traveling. It takes
I've had something similar about the energetics being connected to moving things.
It travels. I was getting, I was like asking questions in the brackets and then just getting answers that filling in here. It travels over terrain, travels to high up or very distant. So curious.
When you mentioned the word sine wave, can you elaborate on that, please? Do you mean a sine wave in terms of that kind of shape?
What I got after let's see, after I got that, I don't know what you have coming up in your presentation, but I started getting these impressions of like audio tones, music. I drew like sheets of music, musical, symbology. Somebody writing some stuff that's in their head. You're going somewhere. There's tones. They're coming into your mind or in your ear, and it's you're traveling or you're mentally traveling.
I kind of like the way that your impressions kind of fit in with the kind of cyclical kind of aspect that everybody was picking up about this target. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about sine wave as well, because to me a sine wave is like a cyclical kind of wave.
Yeah, I mean, those words were dictated to my conscious mind. I just write them down. So, when it says sine wave, I truly believe that it was kind of like a pure tone, like, something pure entering either your mind or your ears.
Okay, great. So Malgo, she had powerful energy AI there. Fabian, you had particles. When I wave my hand, the particles are displaced like pushing my hand through a mist, nothing solid. A slight sense of particle lights like floating sparks or burning embers. Everything else is dark here, so I'll explore these particles as they are my own perception. Primary color is green. Would you like to discuss that further and what your feelings were about that?
It was an interesting experience, and it was very pleasant because what I did during the session was kind of reach out with my hands to kind of feel what would happen. And so I remember doing like this, and the particles seemed to just reform right behind where I would run my hands, as though my hands were underwater and the particles were just interacting with me in a space. And I got the sense that it was a sort of energetics. If I could say a basic shape that the energetics were taking, it reminded me of what it looks like when you drop iron filings around a magnet. So the particles would take on this circular shape in layers. And it really looked like a magnetic field shape. And I was able to disturb it as I ran my hands through. And I remembered that it was multicolored, but primarily green, kind of like a greenish. I remember I didn't type this up. I described it as burning embers, but I remember also kind of thinking it was like looking at a bunch of fireflies, like a green bioluminescence. And so in my session, I think I should have declared this as an AOL, but when I kind of tried to zoom in on what these energetics were, I got the sense that they might be biological, which now that I've gotten the feedback, I don't know that they necessarily were biological. If I were to change my wording, I would say they were natural, that it was a natural energy like field, and it wasn't an artificial energy field that we were sensing. It was just everything about it was natural.
Patrick, you touched upon this briefly before, but this was all of your stuff. You had a lot of impressions about energetics, about spiraling, funneling, this kind of funnel-like, very centered and circle-like energy. So yeah, it's just so fascinating that you all touched upon this kind of circular energy, which seems to be strongly associated with the site, and there's also actual research to back that up as well. So would you like to discuss how you felt about that energy, and can you maybe say what you felt like it was being used for?
I definitely got the funnel. I felt almost like I was being sucked into it, and almost kind of wormhole like that kind of idea. But it was connected with death in my feeling. Some kind. I even have the word in there: transit and transition. And after that crossing point, you all felt to me like moving, like Don was saying, that kind of moving from one place to another. But it was like another. To me, it was another dimension. Either because I referenced heavens and that kind of thing as well earlier on. So I didn't get the feel that they were moving to another location. I felt that it was transitioning in spirit. Somehow that's what it felt like to me. Very web-like, very magnetic, and very funneled in, and being sucked up as well. A feeling of being sucked in and sucked up.
Yeah.
That was a very strong feeling.
Okay. And that's really interesting because even though we can't really verify it, it's not the first time that these kind of ancient sites have been connected to portals.
I got it actually with something very similar with Stonehenge.
Yeah,
as well.
I had something really similar with the Anasazi target.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, same. Yeah.
When I first saw that session, I thought, oh, I've not really done very well on this. But the fact that everyone was drawing spirals and things like that was just fascinating. And it seems like a similar thing has happened on this project as well. So, it could make way to a theory that there is some sort of portal there or something that we don't know anything about.
Yeah.
This is John Dixon's energy motion portable, has some sort of dreamy or illusion-like purpose. And he also drew this down here, which I thought was really, really interesting because it kind of reminds me of the polarities of magnets. And you've also got the sun and the moon in there, which can actually affect the magnetic field, apparently. Also, one thing that's really interesting about the stones is apparently they're constantly changing their polarities, and they don't really know why. So I thought that was really interesting that he made reference to that in a way there. One thing that I did want to talk about was the Dragon Project, which was a group of researchers that were looking into the anomalies at the Kingstones, at the Rollright Stones. So I did want to kind of mention them, named Charles Brooker, which it says at the bottom, who was a retired engineer, confirmed that there are fluctuating magnetic readings at the circle starting from the center. And he realized that he had found a spiral of magnetic change similar to the concentric rings that dowsers have found at the Rollrights. So I thought that was another nice piece of potential evidence that could back up the spirals that the viewers were drawing. Chris, this was your geomagnetic spiral, which I just thought was amazing. And when I first saw your session, I didn't know anything about this apparent geomagnetic spiral that you can find with dowsing at this site. So it was this symbol. I thought I've got to just keep researching this and see if anything comes up. So it was your drawing that actually led me on to finding that there was this kind of dowsing spiral there. And then the drawing next to it I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I put that in there because it just reminds me of that kind of funnel-like aspect that everyone else was talking about. So do you want to briefly discuss your impressions and what you thought about those symbols?
Yeah, so that one on the right, that's kind of a weird one. It's actually, it seems like it's almost like a blend of a tooth fossil, but also I was trying to draw like a maybe like a whirlpool going down. I guess that might be the closest thing. I didn't actually label it, but that's the kind of idea I was getting. But it was also a little bit like morphing between the tooth drawing and then I guess that whole circular. I don't think I named anything as energetics at that point, but I definitely named things as circular. So that's kind of an interesting drawing on the right.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and the spiral was particularly interesting because you do see them carved into a lot of ancient sites. Not at this particular site, but I just thought that was quite interesting that it has been connected to other ancient sites too. And so the next theme that came up a lot was dowsing. And so we're moving on to the whole dowsing aspect of this. So one thing that was really, really strange is that pretty much all of you made reference to dowsing in some way, which was odd, but cool. So obviously you've got your pendulum there. And then John Dixon also had this kind of pendulum aspect going on there with this grandfather clock impression. Don had a clock regulated aspect impression. I've worked a lot with on projects with John Dixon, and I've never seen him just randomly decide to do a dowsing session in them. And I just thought it was really interesting that he just decided to do it in this project. So Fabian, you also had a suspended pendant, possibly made out of metals, silverish, spinning, circular pattern, 2 intertwined curves that overlap, a connection between pendant, the structure mentioned before, stone with carvings. Do you want to talk about that impression and what your thoughts are on that?
That's actually a part of my session I was worried about because I'm not used to the way images come into my mind. So I didn't understand how a pendulous pendant would tie into the rocks and the subterranean cave that I was sensing before. So the images came in as rocks, cave, and with water, and then and energetics, and then suddenly there was this pendant that it is like everything was completely pitch black, just darkness, and all I could see was a pendant similar to a necklace, actually almost kind of like what the necklace you're wearing now. It was just like this silver necklace, like a stone, that was suspended from maybe a chain, and it could be swung back and forth. And I thought, okay, I don't know what this is supposed to mean. I'm just going to say it and put it in my notes. So it seemed random for me. I was just excited to see that so many other people reported the same thing. It makes me feel less crazy.
Yeah, it's so great when that happens.
Yeah.
I think there is just a heavy emphasis on dowsing at this site. Not just now, but probably in ancient times as well, which is really cool. And there's Lily's character there, which is amazing. She's got this woman with like a pendulum in her hand there, and then she's even got a hand holding a pendulum swinging there. And again, this kind of connection to water flowing right above. So that's absolutely beautiful. And yeah, that's the end. So does anyone else want to add anything, or does anyone else have any conclusions?
I'd like to say a few words. I think what we're all seeing is some really interesting correspondences between everyone else's session. This is really fascinating to me. the fact that Patrick, for example, got traveling, and I was getting the sense of traveling, but he was thinking of it in terms of, a spiritual journey, and I was thinking of it more as, just a physical journey, but going upward or something like that. The metaphors that remote viewing presents to your mind and that you report on, you have to deal with that. You have to, and you can't unravel it, I think, by yourself. You need like a team of people to help you understand what you're getting. And I think this is just fabulous.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective on your own work to for you to really realize how good it is. Like I think a lot of people when they first did this project were quite confused by the fact that they'd drawn certain things, but actually when I put it all together, it was, it was such a so many reoccurring themes happened. I thought there has to be something relevant there, and it turns out there was. So I mean, my overall theory for this, the construction of these stones is something to do with water, and something to do with geomagnetism, basically, and how that can be used in some.
I think everyone had some sort of a spiral in there. I mean, I didn't even think of that cogwheel that I drew as a spiral until I saw Chris's a thing that looked almost exactly like mine, except he had curved ends instead of mine being straight. It's like, oh my God, ding, the bell goes off.
Yeah, it was amazing. It actually blew my mind to see all of your work.
Patrick got religion. I had religion and mystical. Henny's drawing people in robes and carrying staves. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Lily had someone there, looked like she was in a robe performing some sort of, function. Wow, this is blows my mind.
I wouldn't be surprised if the stones, that's, I guess, kind of going out on a limb, but so I'd put glowing on around this circle, right? And I've seen in some other experiences, be they like meditation or hypnosis, where there was like some glowing stones. So, is that possible? Maybe somewhere in the distant past that they could have been energetically charged. I'm not sure, but obviously today they're not.
Yes, a few other people talked about glowing as well, although we can't really validate it, but a few people did touch upon that. One thing that I found from that book was that each stone changes its polarity, or something like that.
Really, each stone changes its own polarity?
Yeah. So they
based on what? Like,
let me see. Here it is. Okay. So it says that sculptured stones have fixed polarities. However, at the Rollright Ring, author and dowser Tom Graves discovered that most of the stones were changing their polarities from positive to negative and back again on strict timescales in seconds, minutes, hours, or days. Only a few maintained their polarities. This phenomenon can be checked with a pendulum quite easily at the group of the stones around the eastern exit gate. These stones change their polarities quite rapidly compared to the others.
Okay.
So even this book has got like a little dowsing thing there.
Huh. Wow.
Cool,
That's wild that we picked up on all that.
It's been really amazing. It's the first project I've ever tasked to such talented people. So thank you so much, because it was actually quite life-changing for me to see your work and to see how well you did.
Congratulations on your summarization and slides, by the way. You did I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, really good presentation and great.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I think Fabian will jazz it all up and make it extra amazing. So
thank you. No pressure there.
And yeah, so thank you.
Jemma, thank you so much for tasking us with this. This was a really interesting target.
Thank you. Hopefully the next one won't take me years to put together.
It's okay.
Yeah, I think we were all wrapped up in our own,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
illnesses
everything.
and whatever, you know.
Yeah, life's been a bit crazy, hasn't it?